Welcome everyone, Nina Marnie. I'd like to acknowledge that we meet today on the land of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour their spiritual values and beliefs in relationship to this country. It's an absolute treat to be here at the Art Gallery South Australia today. So happy to see the gallery open and seeing people in there experiencing monster theatres and just enjoying art in person, in real life, IRL, new acronym. Sounds so old. Anyway, just a bit of housekeeping before we get started with today's session. This session will be recorded and will be posted on our website, Guildhouse's website, as a resource for applications and applicants. So you might like, just to bear that in mind, videos and microphones for attendees have been disabled. So please ensure that your microphone remains muted and that your video function is turned off for the entire session. That just helps us to manage bandwidth. And what we'll do in regards to questions, the session will start with an in-conversation between Rhana and Troy-Anthony, and then we'll throw open to questions. Now, people who were enrolling for the session today did send in some questions and topics that they'd like to explore in advance, which we will make sure we dive into in the Q&A session. But any of those questions that come to mind as you're listening to Troy-Anthony and Rhana discuss things, if they've got a burning issue, please just table them in the chat function in Zoom. And we will collate them and make sure that we come back to as many as we possibly can in the Q&A session towards the end. So, first of all, thank you so much to the gallery for hosting us here today, and they are an incredible partner in the fellowship, the Guildhouse Fellowship, which is supported by the James and Diana Ramsay Foundation. The fellowship is valued at over $50,000 and aims to support a mid-career visual artist, craftsperson or designer in South Australia to really enable them to invest in their practice and in their career. And it is a sizable opportunity and it's meaningful, and we're looking forward to hearing Troy-Anthony speak about his experience over the last 12 months. And did I mention that it would not have been possible without the support of the James and Ramsay Foundation? So we do acknowledge and thank the Foundation for their continued support and advocacy for artists and artistic excellence in this state. There's been a raft of incredible initiatives over the last few months as we've navigated COVID-19, and the Foundation has been a real stalwart supporter for the artistic community. So as I said, we're going to start with an in-conversation today, about 25 minutes or half an hour of conversation between Rhana and Troy-Anthony, and then we'll come back to questions and Q&A, which I'll facilitate. I'll introduce our speakers. So Troy-Anthony Baylis was born in 1976 in Sydney. He lives and works in Adelaide on Kaurna land. Darwin, Fitzmaurice region was where he was born. Self-described queer Aboriginal, Troy-Anthony Baylis is a descendant of the Darwin people from the Northern Territory and is also of Irish ancestry. He is an artist, curator and writer, and formerly course coordinator of Aboriginal Cultures, Comparative Indigenous Studies and Indigenous Philosophy at the University of South Australia, Adelaide. His art practice has been subject to 17 solo exhibitions and numerous group exhibitions, performances and publications since 1993. Currently in his final stages of completion, his PhD, Deadly Mimicry, Indigeneity and Drag in Contemporary Artistic Representation, is concerned with analysis, cultural interpretation and ethics of the self as subject. Now, Rhana Devenport, you'll probably all be familiar with. Rhana is a museum director, curator, editor and culture producer whose career spans art museums, biennials and arts festivals. She is currently the director of the Art Gallery South Australia, of course, and was also a director of Auckland Art Gallery, Toi Otamaki, New Zealand from 2013 to 2018. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have Rhana in South Australia for the last year and a half, and what a ride it's been, Rhana. So I will throw over to Rhana now, and we'll get started with the conversation, and you'll see me shortly. Thank you.
Morning everyone, great to be here, and IRL, I haven't heard that before. I love it, Emma, I'm so there. Yeah, terrific to be here and talking to Troy. And Troy, it was a year ago and I was very fortunate, and Emma, soon after I arrived, Emma asked me to be on the panel and I was thrilled. I'd heard of course a lot about the James and Diana Ramsay Foundation and knew that they were tremendous supporters of the arts across all art forms. And this idea of a new fellowship was truly inspiring, and the fact that it was a significant amount of money. It was very open in terms of expectations, and it was really dedicated to artists in South Australia. So for all of those reasons, and it was a wonderful process, Emma. I really want to thank Guildhouse for that whole process, and clearly we made a fine choice. So and I'd also had just seen Troy's work in Sydney in the National at our beloved Carriage Works, and I suppose I'll just talk about those works, which really struck me and impressed me really greatly. And I knew about Troy's work from a distance, but I hadn't seen much in recent years, so it was really terrific to see that postcard series. And I'm just going to read from Katrina Schlumke's text, which I think explains it very well. So she talks about this refashioned notions of dress and a-dress, connecting queer and black in ways that unsettle racial taxonomies. The shape of Baylis's postcards echo colonial breastplates, given as badges of distinction to particular Indigenous people in an effort to control and divide the Indigenous population. But his rendition, they become badges of glorious glomesh, lovingly wedded together with X marks the spot, or the mark of a kiss, marking out the true authority of queenly queers and the Indigenous warriors within Indigenous sovereignty. Each postcard makes a new map of connections between old mission towns, sites of Indigenous Renaissance, and now no longer ordinary suburbs across the nation. You know, one of the things, of course, we all do in our lives is talk to our extended families about their experiences. And my mother grew up on the land, as they say, and it was only recently I was talking to her, and she talked about Kingy, who was on the property and wore one of these badges of honour. So, you know, this is part of our immediate family and life. So this work is seductive, it's powerful, it's memorable. There's a luxuriousness and a camp quality, and yet it talks of great power and history, and of course the unsettling and disturbing nature of what we're grappling with in this country. So so that was just my encounter, and then of course you made a terrific application and you were selected. But really my question for you right at the very beginning of this conversation is, what is art for?
Well, I suppose put quite plainly, it is to, you know, to express myself. But I suppose on reflection, certainly as a mid-career artist now, it's I guess what I create and the reasons for what I create have, you know, developed significantly over time. So, you know, those early days, I guess, you know, I was young, like we all were, and you know, I think as time came on and I became more, when the world opened up to me and I realised kind of, you know, that my identifications and the histories around that were, you know, were absolutely terrible. And yeah, and sort of over time I've found ways to, through my art practice, to kind of deal with that. And I think the breastplates are probably a good example of that, because, you know, these are unsettling, you know, both, you know, personally, but also, you know, people relate to that unsettlement, and it's been a way to direct and refine my anger into something that I think is more useful. I've got to the point in my life where I think, you know, that forcing my anger onto other people isn't really helping matters at all, I think, you know, whereas through art I can be kind of poetic and creative, and perhaps it's a bit more subtle than sort of in-your-face stuff, but I think overall it makes a much better contribution to the world than screaming out on Facebook and, you know, to these kind of echo chambers. I just, yeah, so that's kind of what art is for me now. It's this, you know, this avenue to be able to express myself poetically.
And with a great sense of complexity. You know, I remember when Vincent Nanajira won the Ramsay Art Prize last year, and he made a terrific speech that said, he said, "Art changed my life. Art has the power to change the world." And what do you think of that at the moment, given everything that's going on and your own investigation of Indigenous histories and its complexity in this country? And I mean, as you say, there's tremendous poetry and seduction in your work, but always with a trajectory of investigation.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I'm thinking even outside of the visual arts, you know, that there's creatives kind of doing that. Even if I've been watching it's a fantasy program that called Hollywood, which is on Netflix, I think. And you know, it kind of is and everything. You know, but no, I'm just mindful that that's also a big company. But, you know, that's sort of why I'm saying that it's you know, it kind of in a sense reimagines Hollywood, and I think, you know, even out of America, when some of these you know, great ideas that have come forth, there have been ideas that have come from creative people. So it's not, and you can clearly see that's not reflected in the institution of politics or, you know, these other kind of institutions, but these kind of creative visions which have always come from, you know, artists of various sorts.
So coming back to the fellowship, and again, wanting to mention James and Diana Ramsay Foundation, because they have redirected the support for our studio, which has been, of course, closed for 10 weeks and continues to be closed for another couple of weeks. And instead of being able to offer that support, they've redirected that into a series of artist bursaries, and we've just released 6 artist bursaries, 10,000 each. And again, no outcomes are expected from those, and it's very unusual for an art museum to be offering this kind of support for artists. And I know Western Australia, for example, they allocated money from their foundation, and they offered every single living artist in their collection $2,000 to work on their archive. You know, so it's really, and I haven't seen much else of that elsewhere beyond Australia, that how museums, publicly funded museums, can redirect through philanthropy. In both cases, it's through philanthropy, not government support. So, so coming back to that idea of the bursary and coming to the fellowship, which is, of course, a major singular years project. So, and you were talking before about America and these meccas of creativity. I mean, Berlin always has that sort of great, I mean, for at least a century and a half, has that great allure of dynamism and decadence and creative surges, and the support structures that exist for artists in Germany have always been very strong. So tell me why you chose Berlin.
Okay, well, it's multiple reasons, but I think what, you know, draws me back to Berlin every time. So this was, I think, my 11th time to Berlin.
Wow.
But
so you knew.
Well, I did, but again, each of those times was either for a few days or a week, maybe 2 at a stretch. Whereas this was more than 2 months. So, you know, that it's sort of enabled me to go a lot deeper and wider into the city, and to some other places I went to as well. And it was also a way to you know, to build upon relationships. You know, like all you know, all things really. Like, people don't tend to trust you as much if you know, whiz in and out. You know, it's so it was it's really kind of solidified some relationships and opened some new doors for me. But the idea of Berlin in particular is because, you know, in part because of that, you know, great history of art making and creativity. You know, even German romantic painting, and you know, it just goes on further and further. And again, it's this with Berlin in particular. You know, clearly it was divided at East and West Berlin, and then East Berlin became a non-state. So everyone living in that place no longer had a nation state. So they kind of be totally, just.
So is that idea of reconciliation something that interests you?
Absolutely, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And I guess with my trips to Germany in general, is they repatriate civilization sometimes from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And there's visual cues where it coexists now. And that's really what I love about, I suppose particularly Berlin, but all over Germany. And, and obviously from some severe moments of wretched past, that there's this ownership of that and what are we going to do about it, and that's very, very genuine. And and I see that even walking on the street. So one great example is, I can't really call it, little tripping stones, these little pavers out front of houses or homes, and they indicate the last chosen address of Jewish people, people of colour, queer people, people with disabilities, who were not only displaced but were eradicated. And so there's these little stones which are not invasive, but there's still this little constant reminder.
Yeah.
And they're just, and I really love that. So, and
it's like you're living with a wretched history and as you said, dealing with it and not denying it.
Yeah. And I think Australia has we can learn a lot of things from that. And I know it's a constantly a work in progress and it's constantly evolving, but I just think they're being right on the money.
Yeah.
And, I think it's totally inspiring. I love being there.
And I'll come back to the specifics about German language in a minute, which brings us back to the work that you'll be presenting here at the gallery. But really a couple more questions about that time in Berlin. What was one thing that really surprised you that you never imagined, and what's the thing that you absolutely loved the most about the experience?
Look, two things really quickly. One of them is I had that feeling, and obviously we're great privilege living in South Australia and in Adelaide, and I suppose particularly now with this pandemic, we've been comparatively incredibly lucky, so that isolation's done us wonders really on this occasion. But in other ways, what I loved about with Berlin is that every single time I stepped out the door, I felt creative, and my mind was constantly in work mode, and it was my happy place. And I thought of all of the history of great work that had come from there, and from non-German people too. Bowie in the cave, and you could sense all of that. And it just inspired me every day when I wake up. And I deliberately stayed in locations, multiple locations, to kind of experience those, that in different ways. The probably the thing that inspired me the most is dealing with that idea of kind of, in a sense, kind of reconciling my own thoughts and emotions of my past and all of the things that potentially impacted that. Is I really engaged with the history of religious art more so than what I had before. So instead of being kind of afraid of it, which I kind of think to that point I had been, I just had this whooping moment and realised totally, because some of the the iconography and the scale is just absolutely, it's and the mythologies are right out there, and I thought, hey, it's not so radically different to representations of my own mythologies. So I thought, well, I can kind of, so I made some work about that, which I showed in Berlin at the time, and I've made some more work here from that since I've returned, which I'm not showing as part of the exhibition. I've got that in the bank for something else.
You've been working hard.
I've been working.
Not so
I've been working like a rent stew in the morning.
And just coming back finally, because I know time is running out, that just coming back to, as we're talking about German language, and obviously you had to negotiate those extremely long words in German language all the time, but also back to World War I here, and German and German-sounding place names in Australia were changed, and the anti-German sentiment. In South Australia in particular, the Nomenclature Act of 1917 officially changed the name of towns and districts that sounded German or were German in any capacity. But interestingly, in South Australia, there was a further Nomenclature Act in 1935 that restored some of those names, hence Harndorf and others. And this has become the basis for this new body, one of your many new bodies of work, Troy. So I'm not going to let you talk too much about it, but maybe about how the fellowship allowed a greater depth, and of course you then added Indigenous and Aboriginal names in particular over these with these text works. So and also the fact that they're weaving, just like the Glomesh, you're still weaving a story here.
Yeah, and the weaving is super significant here because it kind of the weaving you have, you weavers and craftspeople would know this, is that, the weave is also about the warp and the weft and that tension. And so, some of these are paintings that I've shredded and then I've woven together. So literally in stasis, these places are, there's this constant tension within the work, yet they're resolved within singular images. So sort of this coexistence of synthetic names for places. And yeah, it's kind of interesting in a sense that I travelled to Germany to realise what was glaringly obvious. I think that sometimes that kind of happens. It's that idea of you step out of place to think, oh, actually, this is going on. And in a way, it's very coincidental. I didn't set out to make work in any way referencing Germany or German language or German settlement or the world wars. But yeah, it just settled at that.
Yeah. And given we started with the unsettling nature of the breastplates, I think that's a good moment to leave it. So I think over to you, Emma, and we may have questions from our audience.
I'm just going to, hello, back in the frame. Well, I think that there was a few questions there that were raised for Troy-Anthony prior to the session starting, and we're starting just to collate some other questions here. But before we move on, Rhana, did you just want to talk a little bit about the presentation of the work and when the work will be available? Sure. We might just give it to the camera, a little fraction for Rhana to talk a bit about the exhibition and when Troy-Anthony's work will be on display at AGSA.
Great. Yeah, so delighted to talk about that. So we have we of course have tiny amounts of space available at the Art Gallery South Australia. We are the smallest footprint of all the state art museums. I never knew opportunity to say that. And of course we use every square inch, which is the vestibule. And of course there's the wonderful Makala wire piece that is in that space at the moment, the Bay of Sick, one of the most appropriate artworks I have ever experienced in terms of timeliness. Her marvellous exploration of illness and wellness and metaphysical analyses of space. So that will be removed because the Monster Theatres, the 2020 Adelaide Biennial of Australian Art, curated by Lee Robb, will end. It's been extended to the 2nd of August. And so Makala's work will be removed from the vestibule. And on the 8th of August, because we never waste any time here, Troy-Anthony's work will be installed in the vestibule, which is wonderful because it's 3 large walls that are in this concentrated space that are impactful. So I'm thrilled about the the reality of these large-scale works presented and 2 or 3 series of works presented in this space. So that's really quite soon.
Very soon. We are absolutely delighted, and that's where the partnership with the gallery and regards to the fellowship is a beautiful harmony because it allows the artist obviously the opportunity, just like Troy-Anthony, to invest in his practice, to travel, to research, to create work, but then also there's this opportunity, incredible opportunity to work with the gallery, to work with the curatorial team, and to present your work for audiences to engage with, and we are really looking forward to that.
And we are also, it will be part of the SALA presentation, South Australia Living Artists, which is such cute terminology. It's like, yeah, artists do live and they do make a contribution to life. So, so one of 4 artists that we're showcasing at that time, which is really exciting.
Brilliant. We'll come back to some of those details. I would not be surprised if there's some questions in regards to what presentation opportunities or presentation outcomes may be at the art gallery, and I think that that's an interesting point that was raised in our conversation last year. Certainly has been a topic of conversation with applicants over the last couple of months. One of the questions for Troy-Anthony, which I think we kind of touched on, but I just thought it might be worth exploring a little bit further with you. One of our attendees today asked, did you develop a completely new concept or idea for the fellowship, or were you able to continue developing previous work? I won't put words in your mouth, but would you like to elaborate on that a little further?
I think it was a bit of both. So it wasn't an expectation that, and I don't think it's an expectation of the fellowship application that you have to describe, you know, to any detail really about, you know, a new body of work you're going to make. So it kind of, you know, for me it was it felt a natural progression because I've kind of essentially built upon, you know, in a sense what I've already, you know, and it's my own authentic self. I didn't kind of set out to do anything specifically different to what I do. I just wanted to but not also show the same thing. So I kind of, so there's obviously a link between my previous work, but it is new work that I've been making. And also there wasn't an expectation that I had to make a whole body of work either. So, you know, so obviously this is, you know, I'm super excited it's manifested into a, you know, what's going to be a stunning brand presentation, I think, in a sense. But that wasn't the intent, and and certainly, you know, that seems to fit for my work, but obviously it's not going to fit for everybody's work. And, you know, so that's not there's no prescribed outcome in that way.
No, thank you for clarifying that. I think that's really important, and I know that's a topic, a big point of concern or question mark for other people. You know, how precise or how prescribed does it need to be? It's not a project application. This is not considered a creative development project. It is really about giving you the opportunity to invest in your practice and explore certain threads and give yourself the space and the time to do that. And I guess that's what's been really exciting about watching you work over the last 12 months, Troy-Anthony, is I know you have been very prolific, and actually it's spurred on so many new bodies of work, some of which have been realised now and many that will no doubt be seeded for the future. Another question for you was a question, it sounds a little specific, but I understand where it's coming from. You know, how much time do you spend in your practice, you know, in the studio, at work? I mean, I know it's a big question that might vary from time to time, but I think we often grapple with what does it mean to be a full-time practicing artist? What does it mean to be dedicated?
Well, again, I think that can absolutely vary on what you do. I mean, some people, you know, it's more within their practice to spend a lot of time researching and reading, and I do that.
That's very much related to your practice as a curator and a writer, and how that what weaves into your work.
Totally, but my making process with most of my work, although not all of it, I've got some that are not so labour intensive, but a lot of my work is super labour intensive. So obviously, you know, the weaving, the knitting, you know, the glow meshing. It's, you know, it takes an extraordinary amount of time. But for me, it so overlaps into my personal life that some of that work I carry around all the time. So I'm constantly, I'm not moving it now, but it's constantly moving fingers, and I don't know whether that's making me more constant or if that's just an avenue for my, you know, busy head to stay focused and be busy on things. But it certainly does, work into my other life. I mean, I'm chopping up onions and I'm doing tiny blow mesh, I'll do tiny bits of onions. You know, it's really that, like that for me. But it's a difficult one. It really depends on the work, and I do spend a lot of time making, but I don't necessarily think, okay, it's now 9 o'clock at studio time. You know, it's sort of, it's give or take kind of constant.
Rhana, I was just going to say, you've kind of created a new adverb, glow meshing. You know, like there's making, there's sewing, there's weaving, there's glow meshing, and you know, it's a very particular milieu that is yours.
I've got
right?
a few of those too. So, the painting can be painterly, well, knitting can be knitterly. So you can describe it
Rhana, I've got a question that's just come in on the chat function, and I thought you might like to address it perhaps as your experience of being on the panel, and obviously being on many panels as a director of museums. I'm sure that's something that you do spend a fair bit of time. How do you reflect upon the difference between what is a fellowship application and a project grant application?
Really good question. And it's something we thought about a lot when we devised the scoping and the scenario, the terms and conditions, the T&C of the Ramsay supported the artist bursaries. And I think with the fellowship, you're looking at the holistic nature of an artist's practice, what they've achieved to date. I think the seriousness of their engagement with their own practice, and I know even though you're about to submit your thesis, you are working 100% as an artist, and that is a really hard thing to do in this country right now. And for all you artists out there, I just bow down, because you are so important for our humanity, and I know it's been really, really tough. And I was thinking back on the fact that if you received the fellowship right now, you mightn't have been able to go to Berlin. So, it's the timing of this is very important, but I haven't lost track of the question. Project grant, and of course, there's some avenues for that, and I know Australia Council has set up those new grants at this time of COVID, and South Australian government did as well. But I think with this fellowship, the Guildhouse Fellowship, it's about, as I said, the holistic nature of the practice, evidence of not only exhibition but a continuation of practice and continuation of investigation, because what is great too is it's about all the stages of an artist's career, and that was one of the good things about the artist bursaries. We were able to support artists at many, many stages in their career. And, I love the idea of, and this particularly happens with Indigenous artists, that, that you may be an emerging artist at the age of 80, Emily Payne, so there's tremendous scope. And so it's also, what kind of impact could a fellowship like this make for an artist, and is it the right time for them to really have a new platform to launch into a new trajectory of their own sense of their career and what they're able to do? So it's quite a holistic, I think. If you're thinking about, and applications are still open, which is why we're doing it right now, it is thinking to really communicate your entirety as an artist, how you work, what motivates you, what's important for you, what you believe art can be, and to give evidence of that with what you've achieved today.
Thanks, Rhana. And I think you pointed out an interesting point that's been raised a couple of times, both in last year's process and throughout the conversations we've had over the last couple of months around trajectory. And we've spoken quite a bit about the fellowship. We want to be able to see that it, as a panel, that'll have a transformative impact on someone's practice. Now, when we say trajectory or transformative, we don't necessarily mean that we're expecting you to change your practice. Far from it. It may be that someone is going to explore something within their practice they haven't had the opportunity to do, but that does not necessarily mean by any means that this process is looking for you to articulate a shift, a change in your artistic practice. So just bear that in mind. That's just a point that sort of came up in discussion. I think I've got another question. Just let me check this out. Okay, well, there's a really, and I knew this was going to come up, and it's great that it's been raised. Thanks, Sarah. The question around the impacts of COVID-19 and international travel. So what does it mean to be ambitious from home was the question, actually. A really great question. And I guess, look, there's lots of ways that you can be ambitious from home, and I think that what we've really proven to ourselves as a community with this, I was in a meeting yesterday, and it was a conversation about which boards of organisations are sitting around putting in their risk register that there was going to be a global pandemic that shut everything down and states closed their borders and we wouldn't be travelling internationally for some time. Not many people, I suspect. But we are here, and this is the reality for now. And what we've really demonstrated to ourselves as a community is that we can still connect, and we can connect meaningfully. It's not the same. I don't think anyone would argue otherwise, but there are still many ways that you can still pursue avenues of exploration, of research and development, of connection. And we don't know yet what the next 12 months might hold in terms of freedoms for travel. But things may open up sooner than we expect. I certainly wasn't expecting the state borders to open up exactly, at this particular time in South Australia. So I think it's not that you have to completely exclude international engagement at all from your application, but bear in mind that it's quite possible that international travel may not be feasible in the next 9 months to 12 months. Yeah. Any other comments from yourself, Troy-Anthony?
No, I think that's a super good point. It's hard because I'm not quite sure how I would have applied. In this instance, because for me it was very much about the building engagement. So it's and it might be that some countries are will open up all the.
Maybe New Zealand might be a good
It's a great place. Yeah, but we don't know. It's actually not the official.
They're very quietly. They have actually announced September as the date that the international borders. But one thing I would caution too is availability of flights. Yes. It's going to be radically different, and that's expense. Right. So I'd say probably don't exclude it, but be realistic and adaptive. And something we've all been able to be is agile.
Absolutely.
And
agility, adaptivity.
Absolutely. And thoughtfulness, looking after other people and being considerate of other people and other situations. And I think those things are really important. So I think even if it is, I wouldn't exclude it from your application, but also be prepared to be agile and adaptive.
But there are some other, if you could call it an opportunity, is that it might be an opportunity for you to be able to do things that, again, you might not have been able to or afforded to do before that are more local or more Australian. Because of course that generous money for me. Of course, a lot of that went for accommodation and travel. And if you don't have that take up a large amount of that budget, you do something else.
And also, you spent 2 months in Berlin, which is incredible, but that was only 2 months out of an entire year. So, I guess what are some of those opportunities that it's afforded you outside of the international travel and research phase? What else has that really enabled? Is it your studio time at home? Would you like to expand on that? Oh,
yes, absolutely. Because it's meant that, actually it was just when I was kind of announced for the national, that I decided to become a full-time artist. But of course, that alone wasn't enough to continue that, whereas the Guildhouse Fellowship has enabled me to continue doing that and continue to not only invest in my practice, but totally focus on it without the other interruptions of, interruptions from the practice. It's not to say there were things I didn't love doing or were valuable, but I've been able to spend a lot more time. So, I guess going back to that other question about how long it takes to make things, this enabled that time to do that. Whereas if I had that part-time job or full-time job actually as before, I wouldn't have been able to make anywhere near as much work as I've been able to make. So,
Great. There's a few questions that were submitted in advance, so I'll answer some of these questions and address them, and please, Rhana and Troy-Anthony, just pop in whenever. There was a question around any preconceived ideas of who should receive the fellowship. The answer to that is absolutely no. There is no preconceived ideas, apart from those things that are covered by the parameters of the program. That it is focused on mid-career practitioners, and that leads to a question that's often asked: is how does one define mid-career, and especially how does this particular award and selection panel address mid-career? Rhana, would you mind if I throw to you a little bit on this one?
Sure. I think I addressed that a little bit before about, an emerging mid-career, and it's something, again, I adore about this biennial, is we've got 3 septuagenarians who are terrifying in their energy levels. And so I think age is almost irrelevant in this kind of question of mid-career. And I think, what does mid-career mean to me? It means that you've established your practice, you're serious about being an artist, you're not fearful about going down that path, and you have something to say, and you have evolved a language that is yours, and you are ready to keep working in depth towards exploring those kind of languages and, multiple languages. And I see, with the trajectory of the work that you've made, frankly, since the fellowship, and throughout that time, is still very much as part of the practice, but it's going wider and deeper. So, and as you said before, Emma, it's not about kind of going on a completely new path. And I think, any mid-career artist knows what they're doing and just can't wait to get back in the studio.
Add to that as well. I kind of think that just in terms of, and look, I obviously wasn't on the panel, but I do think that I know my work straddles between craft design and visual art, but I don't think that that all my identifications was necessarily or really how the decision was made. I think it was because I would just really suggest to use those. It's about articulation, which clearly I'm not doing very, very well. but I can do it very well in writing.
You get the drift.
And I know, and obviously, with artists, the best thing that we tend to be good at is making art. But if you can, you don't have to be the greatest writer necessarily either. But if you could really dedicate time into the writing, because you have a certain amount of words, and use the wordage to be reflective, ambitious, and really, I really laboured over those words. And I think, there's a lot of great artists in this state, and I think that that's absolutely one of the things that got me, is being able to be very clear and reflective, and and I spent so much time on that writing, probably as much time as I spent making work.
And on that point, can I ask you, does the articulation of that help you with your practice? Because I've heard that from other artists who've applied for something like a fellowship, that process of articulating, of really drawing through what it is that they feel they could achieve with this support, or what it would open up, is illuminating even without the actual award itself.
Yeah, I think absolutely, because my process of art making, I don't do editing. And it's not straight out of the body. I suppose I'd only edit it in my head, and then that's it. Whereas with writing, I'm not a great writer, but I put the ideas immediately. I'm not a great writer. I'll put down the words, just get it all out, and then it's a process of editing further and further and further until you absolutely get it right. So you want total clarity, and I can only do that through intense editing.
And I will say that I know that writing is a point of concern or a question mark for many practitioners, and it's a question we often get, is that that people will say, I am absolutely confident in my art making, I am not confident in my ability to represent that art making in words. And in that instance, if that is resonating with you, I really would encourage you to seek out the support of a writing friend or someone that you've worked with before. Ask them for a bit of help, get someone to assist you in the editing process. Obviously, Guildhouse wants this to be a really supported process, and we want to see you absolutely succeed. That is our goal. We're not there to sort of make this an arduous and difficult process where you feel that you're struggling. And Debbie has made herself available and will continue to make some times available to meet with artists over the phone or over Zoom in the lead up to this process to help you clarify some of those ideas and thoughts so that you can really sort of hone them for the application. But I think it's really important to reach out and get assistance, buddy up with someone else if you're feeling unsure, because you can't be excellent at everything. That's not everyone's strong suit. So just thought I'd make that mention. Another couple of quick questions that I'll answer because we're coming close to the end of our session. Do you have to be represented by a gallery? Absolutely not. That was not the case for Troy-Anthony when he applied for the fellowship. That's just not even not a selection criteria, and it's not something that we take into account as a key criterion by any means. But Troy-Anthony is looking at representation and has a number of things in play there at the moment. asked to elaborate on the criteria used to select the Guildhouse Fellow and how do we choose between disparate practices and artistic goals. Well, I hope that I've answered that, and Rhana and I, in consideration of it is a holistic decision. There isn't obviously artistic excellence, the way that someone's been able to communicate their practice, where they see this going, what the impact of the fellowship will be for their practice specifically. They're the things that are really the differentiator. Obviously, we really look closely at your documentation and supporting material, and that is really important. I'm sure as mid-career artists, you understand that already, but I can't emphasise it enough, because if we're not familiar with your practice in depth, of course, that is the first thing we look at, and we might look at some other resources that we can find available, but really invest in that and think sort of carefully about the works that you present as part of your supporting material. Because as Rhana said, it helps us posit what you're saying in a trajectory of your work. I'm just going to check the chat, but just 1 second. I think, I hope we've answered the mid-career question enough, but really just to kind of close that conversation it is about how you see your practice, and if you feel that you are mid-career, tell us why. We have taken an expansive view, as Rhana mentioned. Age is not relevant at all, and we really want to reflect and honour the fact that for many practitioners there are reasons why breaks in your career and practice may happen, for personal reasons, family reasons, a whole range of reasons. And so it isn't like it's a nice neat box of 10 to 15 years of active practice. There are lots of demands and pressures on artists, and that is the reason why we've chosen to take this more expansive view. I think the blurred lines can sometimes happen around the edge of mid-career to established, and we did see some applications from some very almost established artists in the last round. And if you're unsure about that, we welcome a conversation and we'll help to tease that out with you. But if you feel that you would like to argue the case for mid-career, that's with you, and you need to tell us how that fits for you and your practice, and how you see your practice and where you intend to go from here. I do have a question for you, Troy-Anthony. You've spoken a bit about identity, and the question was specifically, as an Aboriginal person, in what ways has it been challenging for you to work with this program? Has there been any challenges? Is there anything that you would reflect upon?
I don't think there's been any challenges for me in that way, or because because of my identifications. And in fact, I think look, this is a little bit of a story, probably backstage earlier. Well, one of the wonderful things about my longer trip in Berlin is I went, obviously got to hang out with more people, and I went to the east for a bit, and I was telling them, kind of a bit like, why are you here? Why Berlin? And then I was talking a little bit about my history and my father being stolen, and I didn't realise, of course, Berliners, the ones I spoke to, absolutely relate to that, because young German kids were taken as well, and I never knew that. So yeah, I just see it as an opportunity to tell more stories. There hasn't been any particular issues. It's not like, and even with the work I'm developing, it's not about other people's stories. It's not really even about a Jalan history or really about focused on my particular identities. It's more focused on, I guess, my kind of belief systems, and also in terms of sort of kind of national interests, I suppose. So
and there's such a timeliness to the work. No one could deny that we are living and breathing this, and we want to tackle this issue. And I'm so thrilled that there is this momentum and this interest. I can't tell you how many times on social media and other avenues I've seen and heard from people who feel enlightened. They've learned more and they want to engage more with this very difficult issue, and this point around reconciliation and understanding how to address it, and to address it with honesty and rigour. So I personally can't wait to see the works be installed in August.
And it's honesty and the rigour, I hope, but it's also it's about not pointing fingers and bones at people and making other people feel crap, because I think sometimes because people don't have the right language, or they don't go to the right protest, or they don't do certain things, you should never discount them as not being on your side just because people have got the language wrong. You should never discount them,
And coming back to what you were talking about before with postcards, the idea of poetry and the role that plays. And just on a closing note, you know, I really enjoyed your essay in the conversation that you wrote a few years ago, and in it, you know, referencing Darwin history and genealogy, and particularly the idea of the trickster and the meaning figure and the spirit figure. And, you know, in closing, I mean, I started with thinking about, you know, what is art for, and are artists tricksters?
Well, I believe so, because we're making, you know, well, it depends on, you know, how you want to define these words. It's all subjective, but you know, we in this sort of, you know, we're all working in mythologies. We're all creating something. They're not, you know, whether it's, you know, it's all, well, literally fabrications that we're painting on fabric. You know, the painters paint on fabric, we weave in fabric. We're creating fabrications which may be embedded in truth and ideas, but there's this interplay that's tricky. And I think, you know, the artist, certainly in my regard, I love that interplay and that playfulness of the trickster. And I guess kind of for me it matches up in terms of some identifications, because it's been you know, that's been a motive of queer theory and queer history, as well as in Indigenous histories as well. So I totally embrace the trickster.
That is a great note to leave on. And I just to recap, the applications for the fellowship continue to be open until the 20th of July. So please get in touch if you are preparing an application and you'd like to let us know, or you'd like some assistance in refining your thinking. We look forward to hearing from you. The selection panel will be appointed and will review the applications in the subsequent weeks with a view to announce the new recipient in August. So we're looking forward to that moment. It'll be incredible, and I'm sure we'll have a beautiful growing list of alumni within the fellowship in due course. I haven't got any other questions that have come through the chat function, so I might leave it there, but please reach out. Don't hesitate to ask us anything as you prepare applications, and we look forward to hearing from you. I'd like just to end by thanking the Art Gallery, thanking the James and Diana Ramsay Foundation for their incredible support. Of course, thanking Troy-Anthony Baylis for making himself available.
Thank you.
And of course, Rhana Devenport for having us here at the gallery, and Guildhouse absolutely adores the relationship that we've got with the Art Galleries of Australia and the opportunities that it brings to life for South Australian visual artists, craftspeople and designers. So thank you all.